Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nexus Podcast. I'm your host, James Dice. Each week, I fire questions at the leaders of the smart buildings industry to try to figure out where we're headed and how we can get there faster without all the marketing fluff. I'm pushing my learning to the limit, and I'm so glad to have you here following along. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Nexus Pro. Nexus Pro is an annual or monthly subscription where members get exclusive writing, podcasts, and invites to members-only Zoom gatherings. You can find info on how to join and support the podcast at nexuslabs.online. Without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the Nexus Podcast. Episode 35 is a conversation with Matt Golden, CEO of Recurve. This episode is a bit of a change of pace from our normal topics, but it's an important one that all of you buildings folks need to be aware of. As Matt says, if you're not aware of the grid benefits of your projects, you're probably leaving money on the table. This is a deep dive into the past and present of energy efficiency, what's changed with COVID, grid flexibility, virtual power plants, grid interactive buildings, and much more, including more buzzwords. Without further ado, please enjoy Nexus Podcast episode 35. All right. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the Nexus Podcast. Can you introduce yourself for everyone?
So my name is Matt Golden. I'm founder of Recurve software, actually Recurve Analytics, technically speaking. We provide tools for utilities and also a whole range of companies out in the marketplace. We think of them as virtual power plant providers, or often call them aggregators, that are providing all sorts of services to all sorts of buildings, everything from solar to storage to insulated attics to IoT devices. We're totally agnostic. We think there's a lot of amazing stuff out there. Stuff that produces grid benefits that often doesn't get paid for it. So we end up with customers paying out of pocket. And we don't think that's right. We think the utility industry should pay their freight, and that's better for everybody. So we actually sell mostly to utilities and provide a solution that helps them figure out which buildings are causing them the grid issues, where the peak's coming from, what end uses, and enables them to engage the market. Sometimes through traditional programs, but increasingly through what we call marketplace approaches, where they work with the companies out there that are building the business models and the financing solutions and the broad range of types of solutions and technologies we need to serve building owners in a much more streamlined market-based approach that gets paid for the performance, where we can actually track the impact that these projects are having. Think of it as a new breed of really automated M&V on an hourly basis that lets us quantify that impact and also value what is that grid impact? What is it worth in terms of transmission and distribution, capacity energy, GHG impacts? And so that these aggregators can actually monetize the value of what they're providing, like a virtual power plant, and make more money doing the right stuff and pass that savings back to customers so they buy more of it and everybody wins. So by way of background, I started and kind of think like an aggregator. In the audio version, you won't know what I'm pointing at, but I have my Sustainable Spaces, which was my original company, now quite a while ago, Shingle, from our old offices. But I'm a contractor at heart. So I was in the solar industry. Kind of a little silly now, but got a little fed up with rebates were coming and going and all that, and got the bug on energy efficiency and said, why are we putting panels on these buildings that are just bleeding energy out everywhere? We should go fix the buildings first. And so Sustainable Spaces was a full service building science based home performance company. We also did some work in commercial and multifamily. Started out thinking like, yeah, we're going to build software, because I had a technology background, and make this automated streamlined thing. And next thing we know, I got 5 contractor licenses and 10 trucks, and we're vertically integrated because it's the only way to make money, it turns out. But really stymied, we worked really hard to get the utilities to create programs to make us go faster, and they just cause pain. It turns out if you get paid in advance based on a rebate, which is the traditional method, if you're in the business and you're doing good work and you have engineers and blower doors and infrared cameras, you make less money than the average guy who doesn't. If everyone paid exactly the same amount, the way you make more money is you reduce your cost of goods sold, and the bottom feeders, the folks producing the least value, are actually getting the most profit, which is not a good incentive structure.
No, it's not.
Conversely, ACEEE and everybody's running around saying energy efficiency is the first fuel. We should do it. It's the most important resource, but doesn't actually behave like one, and it is certainly not valued like one. So it's not worth enough to be true. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve. How do we move from that pay for products in advance based on some average, regardless how it actually performs, pay that to the customer so that, the market's not even making money through that channel, which misaligns the incentives further. And then the flip side to that as well is, and we call that pay for performance, which is That's actually the core of what we're going to talk about. If you're going to pay for performance, the starting point, really the core of our business, is you have to know what you're paying for. What is the product? What is energy efficiency? And if you haven't delved down this rabbit hole, and it's a combination, it's like an onion dropped to the bottom of a rabbit hole. So it sounds a little easier than it is, because it's a derivative. It's a calculated value. So if you're going to bet on a calculated value, you got to know what that calculation is, or you end up fighting over it. And that's pretty much all you end up doing. So everyone's got to believe it's real, but you also got to put in a contract and generate an invoice and get paid, and not end up just litigating how weather stations were chosen or things like that.
Okay.
And then the other side of it, well, I'll give you one more piece. This is the other piece that we'll talk about, which is when I was in the contracting business, we knew for sure that 2 p.m. was peak, right? Mm-hmm. Solar, the duck curve hadn't really started. We had monthly meters, different world entirely. So in this transition to pay for performance, AMI smart meter data started coming online. All of a sudden I was like, holy crap, this duck curve thing is real. It's actually happening, and like, it's really going to happen, guys. Mm-hmm. So as we talk about this pivot from like efficiency as a nice to have do-goodery to efficiency as a valuable resource, it's critical. And like the big leap in value is moving from an average of by month reduction. But let me give you all a secret. Utilities don't want to sell less of stuff, but to actually quantifying when and where it's happening. So demand. And so everything we're doing now is an hourly basis and a locational basis. And that's really the turning point where instead of just writing white papers about how we're a resource, we start behaving like one and can actually migrate from like programs to the resource stack to be a procurable actual resource. And that's important because it's a lot more valuable.
Totally. And the reason I wanted to have you on, as a great intro, by the way, and the reason I wanted to have you on is because the Nexus audience, we're all thinking about things from behind the meter, but that's changing. We can't continue to think about.
We're going to connect all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can't continue to, as a Nexus community, can't continue to think just behind the meter, because things are starting to get a little bit convoluted at the Nexus.
And you're leaving money on the table when you do that. For you and your customer.
Yeah, that's a great point. So before we dive into all that stuff, because I want to unpack basically everything you just said for everyone, I want to ask you about that shingle you have behind you, which is, I saw a video on your LinkedIn profile of you at Ellen's home doing an energy audit. You talk a little bit. I spent
a lot of time in crawl spaces. I've done my dues. But yeah, the context, I think it was like an Earth Day show or something, but it was like a solid 7.5 minutes of my 15 minutes of fame, because I did get recognized, not because like I did such a great job auditing her house, but it was Ellen's house. So like diehard Ellen fans know that episode or knew that episode. So I would actually get people being like, "You're that guy." But it wasn't because they were super excited about energy efficiency.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty fun. And I don't know, she was nice enough to me. I don't know, whatever everybody says.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. You were like trying to work in like the nerdy energy efficiency terms like phantom loads and Alan's just trying to make jokes. So it was
He did tell me, and actually some people, even all this like stuff that's been going on, I got the instructions like, you don't have to try to be funny. And I was like, thank you.
Thank you. Ellen's got that piece.
I got 1 or 2 little ones in there, but
the other thing I wanted to tell you is that you're the second Georgetown alum that's been on the podcast. I don't know if you know Logan Soya from Aquacore, but
I don't, but I should, because there is like a little G-Town clean tech crew.
Yeah, totally. I can send you an intro. Well, so that was a great intro into Recurve. So let's dive into some of that stuff you just introduced us. So I want to give you my background a little bit, because I think it'll help you kind of take us off into this next phase of the conversation. So I've done a lot in like what you just described as kind of like the old way to do energy efficiency. So applying for incentives, submitting calculations to incentive programs, helping my clients, which are building owners.
Was it awesome?
It was not awesome. No, it was actually not fun at all. I learned how to kind of game the system and figure out how to build energy models really quickly to kind of like prove something that was happening, right? So I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with that old world, especially mechanical engineers that have been doing energy management sort of projects for a while, retro commissioning, that type of thing. Can you kind of talk about like the old world and then the new world that we're coming into?
So the most important thing is it's not like one or the other. It's about, you still have to like engineer a good solution that works.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But the way we think about it is we also think about behind the meter, right? And we want to be open and to let the diversity of solutions and engineering and stuff that goes on behind the meter do its thing and hold it accountable to those outcomes, but not micromanage it. And that's really the difference. I mean, energy models make a lot of sense for certain types of projects. You should do them if it helps, right? Like whatever engineering that you do, product selection, implementation, training, like instead of prescribing all of that and micromanaging and double checking it because there's no accountability to the results, right? And so you put yourself in like the old world, and the old world, those are air quotes for the listeners. It's not old at all. It's like mostly still what we do almost everywhere.
Most utilities are still.
But if you're gonna submit a bunch of paperwork and a super complicated energy model that like I can't even begin to understand, and then I'm gonna pay a bunch of money based on that, and then like if I'm the utility, like what if that didn't work? And so they don't really have a choice, right? How else do I make sure you're not trying to screw me? And you call it gaming. I don't even think of it as gaming. Like you give me crazy rules, you pay me to do the wrong stuff. Like I'm not gonna do it. That's like your job.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's a fundamental mistrust because everyone does overestimate because like you're paid to do that at the end of the day. In their shoes, what else are they going to do? Like give me everything and I'm going to try to make sense of this bespoke nightmare you've given me. And if I just micromanage every single thing you do, maybe it'll work. Which of course it doesn't because you either go out of business or you game the system and get around them because you're, information and asymmetry here.
Right.
So engineering and good quality work doesn't go away at all. In fact, good quality energy models, engineering and high quality work now becomes a source of profit in this model because you're not paying. But the trade is you become accountable that it actually has to work to get paid, right? That's the trade-off. But you're trading that for all the bullshit.
Okay.
So the basis of the model is like, we have standardized M&V, especially with smart meter data. We've agreed to how it's tracked. We can measure how these things are doing transparently, nightly. And then you'll get agreed to pay for what we call pay for performance, which is we sign flexibly purchase agreements, which is, you're an aggregator. What do we call an aggregator? Company that's doing.
What do you mean by aggregator?
It's a company that's doing stuff with customers. Like if you can get customers to agree to do whatever you're doing and assign this value to you, you can be a finance company, a large contractor, lighting as a service company, just got a phone with one of them, pace provider. You could be Ohm Connect, you can be Google.
So an aggregator is going to charge the customer to do something, and then they're going to apply for these incentives or rebates on behalf of their customer, which is the building.
We like to call them performance payments because something about incentives and rebates sounds like they're giving you something for free. You're actually getting paid for something you're delivering that's valuable. So I think of this as like two things. How you deliver your services to your customers is your business, and they're going to buy it based on benefits they receive.
Right.
Lower bills, often comfort, better lights that make their products look better, whatever it is. And we want to just leave that to be your business between you and your customer. And how you get paid for that? Do they give you cash money? Do they do a lease? Do they do an energy service agreement? Your business. That's the customer's cash flow.
Got it.
We're talking about a tertiary cash flow that says, you've actually done lighting in 350 homes on a part of the grid that has a peak problem, right? Or more accurately, how about this? Let me use a real peak problem. Actually, we have a peak problem and our blackouts in August happened, at 7 p.m. or, actually between 5 and 8, right? And we have this coincidental HVAC peak with like a commercial peak. And if you go in and put air conditioners in and you insulate attics, you're producing benefits that accrue not to your customer, but to the utility because they don't have to buy $1,400 megawatt hours, right? Or as we install electric vehicles and all this stuff, all of a sudden we're really stressing our distribution network. They can spend millions of dollars on a new distribution system, or potentially they can reduce load and not have to. That's a mutual benefit. So in addition to that customer benefit, right, we're creating a tertiary cash flow that's the virtual power plant that says you as an aggregator now can get paid for the virtual power plant you're creating, the transmission and distribution value, the capacity, the energy, the GHGs, the stuff that doesn't accrue to your customer. We don't want them paying with their credit card for the full freight, and then you shouldn't be giving that to PG&E or Con Ed or ComEd or whomever. You should get paid for that. And so that's what this model is. And it's setting up that grid value so that as an aggregator, you go out and do your work and you're also building a power plant, getting paid for it. And you can take that cash flow. We're all about aligning incentives, right? And you can figure out what you're going to do with it. Are you going to buy down your customer costs like a rebate? Are you going to reduce their interest rate? Are you going to do better marketing? Whatever you're going to do. Okay. In a competitive market, because we don't pick winners, right? And that's the thing. That's actually what keeps everybody honest, right? Is that we're not going to run an RFP and be like, you win, you're it, you're the monopoly, which is also the fundamental flaw in the traditional system.
Right.
And so go forth. And so what that produces is a model that says, as an aggregator, if you can figure out how to sell your product to a customer in a way that they value, that simultaneously delivers and you've kind of value engineer, right? It's not, how do I deliver the best benefit to the customer and maximize the grid benefits and the GHG reductions? And if you do that right, You make more money, your customer gets a better deal, and we get a stable, clean grid. That's the plan.
Got it. So just thinking about the kind of the old way to do it, I'm still kind of like old way, new way. Maybe that's not the right way to think about it because
That's sort of how I think about it.
we're in a transition, right? So
Yeah.
before the
Kind of
transition,
purgatory. We're stuck in the middle.
okay, yeah, we're in the middle of purgatory. The old way was I'm going to do an energy efficiency project. I'm going to upgrade something, right? And part of that is going to be this incentive, this incentive or rebate check. So what's the new model? And I think I know it. I'll just try to, you tell me if I'm wrong. So now I'm going to do that same project and I'm going to get payments on the back end for the actual calculated energy savings at the meter or demand, the change in demand profile at the meter. And so your software kind of sits there and says, this is that number.
That's right.
Okay.
And what you do with that money, so you just created a cash flow. So financing cash flows is called infrastructure investing.
Yep.
That's project finance, right? Not financing projects with a credit card. So you're actually, so you have this cash flow you're creating that in a portfolio is incredibly stable and consistent that you can finance and bring forward. And then again, your customer doesn't even really necessarily have to know it's there ultimately, but you figure out how to use that cash flow to grow your business and get more customers.
Okay. So if I'm an aggregator, I'm just thinking about this totally different now. Instead of being like in the past, I was like, you could call what I've done an aggregator, and I was like a trade ally in the local utility program. So what would be the new model for that with this setup?
So again, you would get a flexibility purchase agreement, which gives you access to these markets. You go about your business, you figure out how to sell to your customers, you enroll those projects, you get paid for their performance over time.
Okay.
That's basically it. And so our role in that is we are not an aggregator ever. That would be a conflict of interest. So we've spent the last decade coming out of sustainable spaces, trying to figure out how to solve this problem and starting with the fact that this shit is not real and you can't pay for performance for sure if you don't have an agreement on what it is in the first place. And the problem is a bit of a joke, but it's true. You take IPMVP option C or evaluation methods, there's flaws in it to begin with, but the real problem is if you ask 5 engineers to give you the savings on the same 50 buildings, you're going to get 17 answers. And the punchline is they're all right because we haven't agreed to anything.
Okay.
And it's really profound. There's hundreds and hundreds of choices that would blow your mind and I'd have to explain on binning methods and balance point temperature. But a big one. So I put a heat pump on my own house, right? And if you use the nearest weather station, you end up with Napa. I'm in Marin.
Okay.
It's close to me, but it's hot. My wintertime savings are 15%. If you pick the closest in climate zone, which is what the methods we deploy use, you get SFO, which is 1.2 miles away, San Francisco Airport, further away than Napa, and I save 23%.
Okay.
Right.
That's just one choice.
Yeah, who's right? So, we spent the last decade building open source methods through like excruciating public processes, mostly funded by folks like the PUC and the CEC and DOE and utility friends. But these are open; they're all online still, like ongoing actually. To apply a new idea, which is this is math. We have lots of data. Let's get everyone together and go through all of these little decisions and test all of the options anybody can come up with publicly against real data and agree how we're going to do it. And not perpetuity. There's a process. We can get better, but we need a consistent standard, right? There was a time in the US when every state had a different definition for a bushel of corn, which is one of the reasons why weights and measures is in the US Constitution. You can't trade interstate if you don't have, now we have one definition. You can't trade this shit if it's different, everybody you ask. And so we built what are called the Caltrack methods, which is a set of methods. Actually, the hourly methods come from, because we looked at all the existing approaches we could find, something called a time of week temperature model. This is how we create a baseline, which came from LBL in the first place, but we improved it considerably in the process because we opened it up and used real data to test it. Which generates an hourly baseline condition for every building. It looks at every month of the year, generates temperature bins for that month, for that building, and then generates a regression model that correlates how the building operates in closed and open states, uses energy relative to weather. Highly predictive, it turns out, surprisingly predictive. In a very standard way that you can verify. And we call those, being able to verify and standardize, we call a revenue grade calculation. You can put it in a contract. We can prove we followed it, right? So those methods and that code are open source. The OpenEE meter code, which is what runs a Caltrack method, is now in the Linux Foundation. So we're the primary operators, but we don't own it. Lots of people use it. It's well documented. We implement it. We implement it at scale, and that's what we do particularly well. How do you take this code and implement it in a way that you can audit, and how do you do it so that you can measure every meter on the grid every single night, on 1,000 servers? That's what we do.
Okay. So what does this mean for all of us certified measurement and verification professionals out there that have spent years in our spreadsheets doing it
so there's
in our
going to
own
be
way?
we're in a transition. That's math. You
Okay.
can't do parallelized computing in a spreadsheet.
Yep.
But there's still a lot of stuff that's not exactly math, especially on individual assets. So we at the portfolio level utilize something called the law of large numbers to wash out most NREs, non-routine events, things like that.
Okay.
If you want to do math on individual buildings and you want to be like an energy services agreement, you have to be right on that building, and something changes fundamentally in that building, then you have to do stuff that's not actually that much math, which is make an adjustment and use an energy model and figure out what do we think happened and give everyone I think of that as a change to a contract, actually. Mm-hmm. And acknowledging what it is. And so the core like routine calculations, if it's routine, we're going to beat you every day by definition, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to do a better job of it too. But there's all the non-routine stuff, which is a different story. Though as you get into portfolios, we can wash most of that non-routine stuff out, because some people buy hot tubs and some people, have their kids go to school, and some buildings Google moves into and some buildings go vacant, and like it washes out in a very predictable way. Got it. Okay. But yeah, don't compete with real software in the cloud to do math if you're doing it in a spreadsheet or an R on a local server. And that's, some of the calculations we're doing would take 14 months on normal servers. We run them on 10,000 at a time. Got it.
Hey guys, just another quick note from our sponsor, Nexus Labs, and then we'll get back to the show. This episode is brought to you by Nexus Foundations, our introductory course on the smart buildings industry. If you're new to the industry, this course is for you. If you're an industry vet but want to understand how technology is changing things, this course is also for you. The alumni are raving about the content, which they say pulls it all together, and they also loved getting to meet the other students on the weekly Zoom calls and in the private chat room. You can find out more about the course at courses.nexuslabs.online. All right, back to the interview. All right. So, real quick, I wanted to ask you about, there's a lot of companies out there, especially on the building software, analytics software side, that have their own ways of doing these calculations. So what would be the benefit of kind of standardizing on these more open methods that you guys are sort of promoting out there?
Because you're not allowed to measure yourself and get paid on your own measurement. It's there's always so back away from our shit for a minute. I learned this stuff because after doing Recurve, I did a bunch of other things, including spent a bunch of time during early solar securitizations in that process. And what we're bringing to the table is we're like, oh, you're so innovative. I'm like, not innovative. We're trying to copy how this shit actually gets done.
Totally.
In the real world. And the standardizing of M&V, I like that kind of stuff. I'm a bit of a nerd, but I don't actually care. We just need a consistent weights and measures. And then so it has to be good too, because the grid people have to believe it's real, and we got to know it's real. But in terms of making this all happen, the important thing is it's consistent and replicable and definable. You put it in a contract. So you just can't do it, especially if you are honest about how sensitive these calculations are. And I just mean that in a general sense. There's always a third party, an asset class is underwriting criteria with documentation and third-party verification all the time, right?
Right.
Whether it's your appraiser behind your mortgage or your FICO score behind your credit score, you don't get to be no, trust me, I am creditworthy, doesn't carry weight.
Yeah.
So I would just say all these companies who say we're going to go implement your work, measure it, and you're going to pay us based on what we said happened. That's part of why we can't scale. And the building owners are well, what? And it's a terrible business anyways. I don't really we can do it at scale, but why you want to be an M&V? It just makes you less credible. And again, the more you know about M&V, and I think your audience does, and these hundreds and hundreds of little decisions, and I would encourage people to go to the caltrack.org website and look at the actual technical requirements and ask, how many of them you even heard of? How many of these decisions do you even know exist? Most people that run the code don't even know what's going on behind the code, right? It's a black box. So we're the anti-black box. Every method we use and all the code we run is open to all parties. Anybody can run it. These engineers can absolutely run. These companies who are doing this can just literally pick it up and use it. And then we can verify it, because you still actually, in implementation, it's so sensitive. You just shouldn't. It's a conflict of interest, flat out. And it's a
So,
big barrier in our industry that we just need to leap over. It's holding us
yeah.
back.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who's done those calculations on the side of the ESCO, it's very difficult to
I can give
explain
you
how
any number
that's
you want. I
trusting.
can give you any number you want. You'll never know why.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've also, so I've been in a situation where I've been the M&V person, right, doing the calculations to show the savings. I've also been in a situation where I've had a black box provider try to get me to give my rubber stamp on their savings calculations, and I've tried to reproduce them. And I've always been in this like, you can't do
And the
the
box
black
itself
box.
is worthless. Like we've looked at like energy models, these boxes, you can test them in a lab all day long, but how do you know how they were actually used? Is like, it doesn't matter what it does in a lab when they're highly motivated. You can be super accurate in a lab. And we've seen this. So like we looked at like on the building modeling side, which is a similar problem. We looked
Oh yeah.
That's where a lot of this came from. Was like, and on my Recurve, we built energy modeling software. And so we took all these modeling tools. We said, well, how do we let them in the market? We're going to let people pick their tool. So we created this like empirical test. Let's test all these. We'll have the providers of the software prove it works well. Here's a bunch of buildings, model it. We'll look at actuals. Hey, here's a whole bunch of software that in the lab worked great. They were very motivated to use it well, right? In practice, we only delivered 30% of predicted results using the same software that could totally perform in a lab.
Wow.
Why? I don't know. Lots of reasons, actually. Incentive
Okay.
reasons, like it's super freaking hard to use the software. People didn't give a shit. The people who were using it were just like, how quickly can I get a rebate? And
Right.
the more savings their model showed, the bigger the rebate. So like, what are you going to get? Crappy models with high savings.
So this matches up with another one of the patterns that shows up on this podcast over and over again, which is there are so many people in the buildings industry that are doing the same thing in different ways, and basically solving the problem, same problem in different ways, in different silos, and building owners are paying for each one to do it all differently across the whole entire industry. This is just one example.
Yeah, there's way too much overhead, which is a massive drag on our scalability. And so like one challenge is there's a lot of people that make money in what we consider fat.
Totally.
However, that's holding everybody back. So everyone's like, no, don't take my fat away. I need this fat to live. We want to go the other way and say, let's go build muscle. And if we build muscle, everybody makes way more money and we're going to scale. And there's still like, when I talk about like, are you an IPMVP certified, there's shit tons of work out there. Like, but instead of like being 6% overhead on a small project in the stack, like let's make it really efficient and let's go get 60 more projects instead of that one, right? And because like the drag is insane. The complexity is crazy.
This gives me justification for what I did last month, which is let my CMVP lapse.
We are completely IPMVP compliant.
Well, yeah, but I'm going to say
so could anybody. That's the problem. We're like,
exactly.
That means nothing, right? Like,
yep, you guys handle it.
General principle. People are always like, oh, we use IPMVP, and like that,
it doesn't mean a whole lot.
It's like 4 general principles.
Totally. All right, so let's talk about a couple of these concepts that are enabled by hourly data, like you said. I just want to make sure I understand some of these terms. So you mentioned CalTrack. Is that the same thing as Open EE meter? Is that?
Well, there's a weird history there about how it came about, but CalTrack are methods. That CalTrack, CalTrack.org says like, here's how we're going to do it. You go to GitHub, here's all the research, blah, blah, but it defines a set of methods and a technical reason why.
Okay.
And then Open EE meter, which actually got split out because people who had black boxes were super pissed that we were building open method code. And so like politically we had to separate the two. Never really meant to be, but it was because we got attacked by all these people being like, you can't, open source is going to kill innovation, which is total baloney. So Open EE meter and CalTrack are the methods, but you can have methods up the wazoo. How do you know if they were followed? And like rounding matters, order of operations matters. So Open EE meter is the open source. And what that means is anybody can use it for any purpose without restriction in the Linux Foundation implementation of those CalTrack.
I see. Okay.
And that's actually one of really 3 major tools that we use. And it's actually, by the way, this is really important. The real problem with M&V is nobody can do it anymore, especially in commercial, period.
Okay, why not?
COVID.
Okay. Yeah.
All M&V methods, except for what I'm about to describe, no longer work, period. And so the problem being is that, and by the way, it doesn't matter, deemed savings from like a utility sense, based on a work paper from 2 years ago, useless.
Yep.
Option C, based on an energy model of last year,
Doesn't make sense. Yep.
an energy model in general for any purpose, what assumptions are you going to use?
Right.
How would I verify those assumptions? You're just guessing. That is a major issue we got to confront, that these things are completely screwed and useless right now. All you measure is COVID. And the problem is that there's, especially in commercial, when we look across NACE codes, categories of buildings, like, grocery is down by 4%, but 30% are up. Some of them up a lot because, like, maybe they're open at 6 a.m. now to let, people that have immunity issues in.
Mm-hmm.
Some are closed. Beauty salons are down by 75%. So very complicated. And they're all recovering at different rates, right? Like everyone in Marin, everyone's recovering. Some buildings are opening, some aren't. Depends what's in them. Very hard to tell. Oh shit, we have a stay-at-home order again. Everyone's going down again.
Right.
The M&V community is like, oh, well, we have our NRA handbook, which is another 150 pages of stuff you might want to do. And they're like, we'll just use that. If we just apply that. And like, honestly, if you had an army, if you could camp out an engineer in every lobby, I don't think you can do it.
Yeah, if an engineer was just sitting there making adjustments every time something changed.
Too wacky, too crazy.
Right.
So you say, well, what are you talking about? Because you just described CalTrack is option C IPMVP, which it is. So we now have to, we always needed to, but now we have to have a two-step process. Okay. The second step is to, and this is more concerning for everybody, accuracy in M&V on an individual building is no longer possible, flat out. However, what we are able to do is provide revenue grade, what we call settlement quality numbers on a portfolio or a population. And we do that by using something called the grid meter. And we've been working on automating population comparison groups and the tools to get access to that data, which I'll describe next, for the last few years. So beginning of the summer, I had some friends at DOE, they've been funding a lot of our work. And I was like, holy crap, this is an emergency. Nobody can do M&V anymore. We have some ideas on how to do it. So they were good enough to fund us. We worked with a research partner, a CCA in California called MCE. So we had use of all their data, smart meter data. Yeah. And we generated a big working group of like top evaluation thinkers and whatnot. And we said, all right, we know how to do this. We're going to use these methods we developed to do comparison groups, and we'll be able to normalize for COVID. Mm-hmm. So we got going, and nothing worked. Nothing even came close to working. Nothing worked. Couldn't come up with any way to make it work. We tried this, we tried that, we tried simple, we said complicated. Let's match it, let's match each individual customer to a portfolio other, but it didn't work. I was a little worried it was not ever going to work, but luckily in the middle, not really luck, I got a really smart group of people. We came up with a different approach, a really fundamentally different approach. Well, some of the words are not fundamentally different, but the approach is quite different, which is, so we've created in the grid meter, a set of methods and code, all open source, same thing, that allows us to look at a treated population and create something called a stratified sample, which is not a new idea in and of itself, except for how we're doing it. So a stratified sample is like a political poll, right? You don't just poll, you gotta have a sample that represents your voters. Mm-hmm. 20-year-olds don't vote, maybe at the same rate as 60-year-olds. Yeah. And so what we do is we run the OpenE meter on every single meter on the grid, treated and untreated customers. And then the difference we have is we know who our voters are. They're the treated customers. Okay. And then we run, because we have large scale computing behind us.
And you mean treated customers in terms of?
So we look at the company where we have projects, right? We're saying we're
projects
a comparison group that is like those folks so that we can deal with things like COVID. Got or, it. It's a peak event and they send out, there's radio ads, or electric cars are happening, or, the economy changed. This is all stuff that doesn't get picked up in M&V. And it can be profound, and it's increasingly profound with the grid transition going on and electrification, and can't just be adjusted away.
Totally.
So we look at those customers that actually got the retrofit done. We look across these 150 key metrics like percent cooling, all these derivatives that CalTrack spits out about these customers. And then we look at the population and we run a process. You've heard of 4D chest. That's a joke actually, but it's a thing. 4D chess, something's really complicated. 4D chess. Anyway, this is 5D stratification.
I thought you said 4D chess. 4D chess. Got it. Okay, cool.
So we'll look across in an automated way, look at every binning combination and also every combination of these 150 potential metrics in the population to generate a comparison group that matches that control group or the treated group. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy predictive.
Okay.
We actually thought we'd screwed up at the beginning because when we first got the first results out, because it was a lot of work to be able to do it in the first place, a lot of coding. We're kind of coming up with water. The comparison group is so close to the treated group that we thought we'd screwed up because we couldn't see the difference until we zoomed in. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we run that comparison group and then we difference the differences. So we say, all right, you shaved 17%, but the general population increased by 2%. And you difference those and you get the net impact, net of the population changes that are occurring, and net of COVID.
Okay.
And it works perfect, and like it works amazingly well through COVID. In commercial, you do have to know NACE code because you can't be comparing beauty salons and grocery stores.
Okay.
But if you do with that one key thing, which we always know because you can buy that info if you need to. Now we can do M&B.
Cool. So NACE code is like what type of building it is. It's basically what type of space.
Exactly. And then we use something called, also funded by DOE, something called energy differential privacy, which is a privacy technique that Google uses on location data. It's actually being used in the US Census Bureau, but it's never been used in energy, which is a method to inject random noise into data sets that allows us to use population data and obscure it in such a way that it's not a privacy violation.
Got it. So if I'm a nail salon and I was supposed to shut down and I didn't, you can't, out me basically from code. Okay.
Right. So we're using samples. So like these are real customers, but there's no way to know who they are. And beyond that, there's no way to know what is true and what is actually just noise we're injecting.
Okay. Very cool.
It's how to break that stuff free. This is the excuse they have for not letting us use it, right? Privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, that is a freaking complicated way to say that one is question M&V right now. People are not talking about this because it's an existential problem and no one wants to talk about it.
I've put it in the newsletter a few times. I've been asking this question since about April, because when I was at NREL, a couple of our projects got really derailed by the fact that we couldn't measure before and after effects of the software we were testing and piloting. So yeah, I'll actually.
There are P4P programs running this traditional market, like site-based, and like it's freaking nuts. So talking about that original point of like people measuring themselves right through COVID, like we have companies who are retrofitting buildings, measuring their own shit, trying to make all these adjustments, and then someone's going to pay them directly for that.
Yeah, especially when it's in their benefit that there
blows
happens
my
to be
mind.
no people.
It blows my mind.
Building.
It blows. I find it just so strange that that so many people don't seem to find that this is a problem.
Oh, I'm 100% with you. And a lot of people have responded like, I don't know what we're going to do. So what do you think we are going to do from like a single building? And if I have a customer and they're an office building and we did say a performance contract 2 years ago, what am I doing right now? What are we doing to say what the savings were?
So in that case, I think you have to stipulate to some degree. You're kind of
screwed. Just have to, yeah.
I mean, again, I'm highly skeptical if you take Evo's NRE recipe book of things you can do that so you can come up with something, but really this is a contract, not math. Yeah. So what you really need to do is go to the customer and agree to a contract change that says like, shit, COVID, maybe we'll use last year's and stipulate, or here are the 16 adjustments we're going to make, but there's no way to verify it.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's law of diminishing returns, and it's another onion in a rabbit hole. It gets worse and worse and worse as you dig into it. Totally. But at a different level, this is how we should be doing it anyways, is customers, one of the reasons they don't tend to buy ESCO agreements, except for like MUSH, municipal utilities, schools and hospitals, and federal. This is too freaking complicated. No one actually believes it. So, I see a big trend, and I think we need to be looking at this as like cold beer and warm showers, and look at how risk is managed in like every other industry. And so again, there are these energy services models like the MESA model, Managed Energy Service Agreement, where instead of like trying to be perfect on each building and treating on each and every asset, you get a portfolio and you can buy insurance for that portfolio, and you say, you know what, we're going to, your bill was $1,200 last year. It's going to be $800 this year. You're just going to pay me. And I'm going to win, and I'm going to win some and lose some across my portfolio.
Yep.
Sometimes that $1,200 bill will end up being $1,300. Sometimes it'll be $600, but in a very consistent way, and give the customer something very simple and manage the risk like an adult. Let's take it to market. Risk is good. Risk is good if it's manageable. Individual buildings are not risk, it's uncertainty. But you package that all up into a building, right? So like, here's I'm giving a car loan, right? I would say like, hey, FICO scores a 700 up, have a 6% default rate. If I was doing that on one customer and they lost their job in default, I am screwed.
Right.
If you do that across 1,000 customers, you're going to get 6%.
Totally.
So that's how risk is managed everywhere else. And contrary to popular belief, energy efficiency works the same way. And with the exception of like the most bespoke applications, the industrial buildings, the large scale commercial buildings where you got to get a bit fancier because they're one-offs, it works really well in resi for sure. Small business, no problem. Office buildings, retail, groceries, food services, much more predictable. We wave our hands at this, that everything's a bespoke nightmare, and it's not, in our opinion. And often we generally know in advance, by the way, who is a bespoke nightmare. And so the other thing is like, instead of building our whole industry around the 6% outliers that are really, really hard, let's build everything around the 94% that are down the middle, and then decide what we do with the other 6%. And that's our approach. Like, there are companies, like we will look at buildings and like, if we can't model the baseline, they have, I don't know. This is an actual example. I was just looking through it and I'm like, why is this one so wacky? And it was in the bottom floor was like one of those art studio things where you can like paint dishes. And so it looks like kiln. And we can't predict kilns.
Right.
So if it's worth it, so the question then is, what do you do? So this is a small enough asset, stipulate it. Who cares? It's like 1% of the portfolio. Or you could go in and hire an engineer to like figure out when they run their kiln or make an adjustment. If it's big enough, it's just not big enough to bother. Like we'll wash it out. Doesn't matter.
Totally.
Right?
Okay.
But that's a business decision, not an M&V decision.
Got it. Okay. So I think a lot of what you described so far is sort of pinned on our sort of newfound hourly data, right? And this hasn't gone all the way across the world yet. Like not every building has hourly data yet, but a lot of this sort of depends on hourly data.
So Caltrack has three sets of methods.
Okay.
Monthly, daily, and hourly.
Okay. So you can do it if you just have utility.
We rarely ever touch daily, because if you have daily, you generally have hourly.
Yeah, exactly.
It went that way. We started with monthly because we didn't have hourly. And anyway.
Okay.
So we run monthly models, are standardized, totally consistent. I mean, essentially Prism on, if you know the Prism model, like for just baseload heating, it's not rocket science, but doing it consistently did take 3 years, because even though like the basic heating, cooling baseload model is not rocket science and construct with monthly data, squeezing out all the details and all the data cleaning rules and everything is hard. And it sits on top. That's the same set of rules that both sit on. So you can get a consistent answer, but you can't fix the grid with that. And there's always more uncertainty because you're fitting to 12 data points.
Right. It's tough.
And there's also just inherent biases. It tends to underestimate certain shoulder months and overestimate other periods. And like, those are inherent biases every time you do a monthly model. They're just baked in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on the other side of things, doing the traditional way with hourly data is also really difficult. It's just like too much.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just too much.
So what almost everyone that says they're doing interval with traditional data, what they're actually doing is adding it up to month and then running traditional models.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the time of week temperature model is really a DR model. We're using it to unify E and DR. Like we don't care. We can actually tell the difference between long-term changes and short-term responses within the same signal. We think of what we're doing as a unified field theory. We don't care what it is. We care what did it do and what's it worth. And what's it worth is a function of what you're responding to. Is it a market signal from the CAISO because we're having a blackout? Or is it fighting the duck curve every single day? Blackout's worth a lot more, but there's not much of that. Fighting the duck curve every day is worth less, but worth a lot, but there's a lot of it.
Let's talk about that. So let's kind of start high level for people like we talked about before we hit record. If I'm a building owner or I serve building owners, why should I care about demand flexibility? Why should I care about everything you just said about the duck curve and the time of day and things like that? Can you just like maybe?
Well, we should all care because we're trying to fight climate change and decarbonize. Put that aside, because nobody does this shit because of polar bears, in my experience. You got to write a big check.
Yeah.
So I've had crazy environmentalists scoff at the big check when it comes down to it, right? So money, you're leaving money on the table. That's why you care. So at a fundamental level, your customer is investing in all this stuff in their building that could be potentially doing harm or good actually to the grid and GHGs. And the thing we're fighting is that, and the reason to do this at a macro level is that as we decarbonize the grid, as we bring on renewables, you might have noticed the sun rising and setting every day, right? And so you end up with like the supply of generation not being coincidental with our peak, which it varies a lot. But in California, it's that 7 to 9 p.m. window. It's pretty common that you get like a late afternoon coincidental peak, resi and commercial at the same time. So the big idea and what makes this valuable is that shifting load around is the new game in town, right? We have to figure out how to use the clean energy we're generating at the times when when otherwise we'd be buying really expensive, dirty stuff. So, obviously we think about storage and EVs and all that. We do too, actually. We think if it's behind the meter, it's the same thing. But there's also really simple other valuable stuff, right? Like if you got a air conditioner and no attic insulation, there's no such thing as a flat reduction. That will produce really valuable load shape impacts during the peak window very reliably. It's not dispatchable, but it's valuable, right? There really isn't such a thing as a flat nothing, right? refrigerators can be turned off. OpenConnect does this, right? Like you can turn off a refrigerator for 2 hours, no problem, right? It's not flat. So like, a new refrigerator will be kind of a flat reduction, but you can also control the damn thing, right?
Okay.
So the opportunity is to help solve that problem, which is a very expensive problem, and there's not enough of any of the storage and EVs and all this crap that's mostly aspirational anyways, not even close to enough of it. And the demand is going up, which means value goes up with it because there's not enough supply.
Okay.
So why? Because if you're not doing it, you're leaving money on the table, potentially really big money. Why should your customer use their credit or asset value to buy a set of benefits that goes to a utility, for-profit utility in most cases? So the opportunity is to value that correctly so that you can reduce the cost to the customer, make more money, scale your business. And then the policy objective is that we want to give you a reason to do that. One of our aggregators does refrigeration controls, and they do utility programs right, left, and center, but they're all based on averages. And so showing them the avoided cost in California, which is what drives when savings are valuable, even though they're in all these utility programs, no one ever asked them to reduce peak. It didn't matter. Everyone's paid on averages.
Right.
So they're like, well, wait a minute. You're telling me if we just move our compressors out of those 3 hours in the summer, that's worth a lot? Yes, it's worth a lot. And so, the way I sometimes, and I don't mean this in those negative comes up, but this is like the moral compass to our industry, right? Like we're totally fixated on customer benefits and savings. And in order to pivot, so we are also considering grid benefits and GHGs, we need to make them valuable. And that's just how we do it. And like what we end up with and why this is great policy is that now the market, everybody that's touching buildings, and there's all the cool people doing work out there today, but I also want to engage United Technologies and all the big folks that control huge loads that like will never screw around with the utility program. I mean, like you're in the virtual power plant business now, and you're going to make more money and get more customers if you can figure out how to also deliver on grid benefits and GHG reductions, right?
Got it. And so what about the buildings out there that don't have the incentives to take advantage of those, so that they have rates that are either flat or
So rates are a conundrum.
Yeah.
Rates are always a laggard. They never express the true grid value. You have all sorts of like edge case equity issues that are real. Mm-hmm. And if a customer is getting savings on their bills, they end up with a savings cash flow, which largely they have to pay with their credit card. So we think there's moral hazard in focusing entirely on bills. Now, reasonable time use rates is a good thing, and also just the complexity, like even large buildings don't have people like you push this all into bills, you're making everybody an energy trader. That's what you're doing. People are like, you look at the retailers, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, they're on the market. They're like, they're hedged up to their eyeballs, and customers can't hedge, right?
So if I'm doing a project,
just to finish up. So this is a wholesale signal, right? This is a signal between the utility and the aggregator, right? Where you can manage that risk and not retail rates.
I see. Okay. So right now today, if I go do a demand flexibility project, the utility for the most part is seeing the benefit of that, unless there's some way for me to capture that value, right? And so what you're saying is, as an aggregator, I can capture that value, and then I can figure out how to provide that in the right way to my customers, which are the building owners.
Right. And it aligns the incentives to the whole system. Now you got a reason to invest in this stuff. It allows you to finance it properly, like an integrated asset, manage the risk.
I see.
And to be honest, for all the M&V reasons we just described, we're never sure what the hell is happening on individual assets, right?
Right.
And so the signal ends up being really messy to the customer anyways. Like, you saved energy, and like, no, my kid went to college. You didn't save energy. I had a baby, right? Like, this is not shit the customer should be dealing with.
Right. It's also too complicated. They don't care.
Drastically too complicated.
So you guys are basically saying, here's the system.
Yeah, you're right. By the way, and complicated, it's worth like cappuccinos to the individual, right? So you got to roll it up to make it useful.
Something like that. Some terms that they actually care about. So you guys are coming through with software and saying, we're going to align the incentives in this system. I think I'm starting to picture it now. After this whole conversation, I'm starting to get it fully, which is the point of this podcast. Can you talk about a couple of different terms? So what is a virtual power plant? And you've talked about it a bunch. I know what you're talking about, but I don't know.
Similar to an aggregator in that it's a big idea. So if you install insulation, you're building a virtual power plant. If you put controls on a building, you're building a virtual power plant. If you replace HVAC systems or install storage or solar behind meters, you're building a virtual power plant. If you send someone an email and they change their behavior for some event, you're building a virtual power plant. If you're doing E or DR, it's all virtual power plant. We don't care. So it's really just a way to talk, an integrated way to talk about all this stuff. So we stopped putting it in silos. First, it was a portfolio of buildings in a place affecting the grid in some way, right? And how you get there is beside the point. It's that you've aggregated this resource. It's reliable. We can measure its impact. It's a virtual power plant.
I could plug a bunch of interval meters in, you can do your calculations in your software, and there's some sort of power being.
Well, what we're doing is we're measuring the change, right? Like if so,
change being
virtual power plant, like this aggregation of 500 buildings that have my controls and whatever are responding either to a long-term system, like, hey, we want you to reduce so we don't have to build that distribution system, or there's no grid event. That's responding like a power plant, but it's virtual and it's flexibility. So it doesn't have, it's not exporting necessarily. It could. But you're responding to this signal, and it's equivalent to, right? Like instead of building a power plant, we're deploying virtual power plants that do the same thing, because producing electrons and using less of them has the same impact. Just happens to be producing less of them tends to be cheaper, has no GHG impact, and also has a co-benefit, which is that it actually helps customers because you get better buildings too, not just grid scale investments.
Totally. Well, okay, so I think that's a good intro to VPPs for everyone that hasn't heard. What about grid interactive buildings? So what about that concept?
If you ask our buddies at DOE, who we love because they've funded a lot of our work, we have a different opinion. Like, there's one aspect there's one school of thought that says this is kind of we have a very specific opinion about this. That we need every building and every device in the building to be automatically controlled, and some utility or somebody in the middle is going to control it all remotely.
Okay.
We think that's all true, but we just are not as diabolical about it, in that, like, we think control is going to come from the aggregator, the DERM system, the control system. It isn't going to be some centralized. We're not going to like utilities. We think are distributing, not, distributed resources are not then going to be centralized to controlled by, I'm not going to let the utility control my smart toaster oven.
Right.
Then I want that controller. I'm going to contract with somebody to control it, but it's not going to be a one size fits all. And so we think we are absolutely doing grid interactive buildings. We think we send a price signal to an aggregator that enables those buildings to react to the grid in whatever way makes the most sense for customers that they'll actually buy. And we think there's going to be lots of different ways that's going to look. That's the alternative view to, like, everyone's going to use this DOE standard, and PG&E is going to control all my stuff.
Right.
I think it's wholly unreasonable. I mean, many of these utilities don't even know where their meters actually are. I don't know. I'm doing a lot of this work in my own house, and it's like a bespoke nightmare for me to do it in my own house, with 5 contractors' licenses.
Okay, so there's going to be aggregators that are going to basically design the grid interaction for their customers, and that they're going to have an agreement with their customers that there's trust involved in what's happening.
And I'm going to pick them. They're not going to afford, I use Ohm Connect, for example. Okay. Fair warning, I'm an advisor there too, but I connect, slowly but surely I've been connecting shit to controllers, and they'll turn them off for me during grid events. But then I was like, I don't want you to, I don't know. But then I decided I don't want you to turn that thing off. So I have control over it. I don't know, it's mine.
Yeah.
So we believe fundamentally that the meter is the cusp, right? On one side of the meter is the grid. The meter is the grid asset. That's where all the telemetry comes from. And then everything behind the building, I'm pretty sure I own all the shit in my house.
Yeah. Okay.
That we don't think the grid extends into the house or into the building. And we think the utility monopoly has to have an edge also. Are we going to let utilities control transportation, heating and cooling of all buildings, lighting, refrigeration? Where does the monopoly end, given everything runs on energy? Are they just allowed to control the economy?
Yeah.
And that sounds hyperbolic, but where's the edge?
So with this GEB concept, do you picture there being multiple aggregators that serve different buildings? So each building having multiple aggregators, do I need an aggregator for my electric vehicle charging systems, and then my aggregator for my HVAC?
It depends what the measurement barrier is. Some things we can isolate, but in general, we think you will, at your master meter, have an aggregator that you'll choose to work with. They may subcontract with others, because how you break the savings out between devices is kind of a contractual agreement. Things that have meters on them, car charging or solar, can be isolated. We can take that out of the equation. It's a little bit of a sloppy answer. There's going to be, I think, different iterations of it.
Okay. Got it. Cool. All right. So as we kind of wrap this up, this has been super helpful for me. I want to ask you about Your answer to my favorite question. So I always do one question, ask everyone the same question. So my question for this year is, what's the number one thing you think needs to change to unlock smart buildings? And you can define smart buildings however you want. You have a different perspective than most people on the podcast, but what's the number one thing you think needs to change to just sort of blow things up?
Boy, there are so many fun barriers to talk about here between access to large scale capital and competitive markets. And I guess the fundamental thing that I believe we need to put in place is market access and competitive market access, right? That I believe businesses, whether it's the customer in the building or the aggregator figuring out how to invest millions of dollars to build a business model and deploy it, respond to something called money and other things too, but we have to align incentives around what makes money, what is valuable. And so, it's pretty consistent with what we've been talking about here, but I think having a price signal that makes doing good for the grid and the climate outside of the four walls of that building is the critical thing that aligns interests so that, again, producing stuff that actually works becomes a source of profit to the market and a better deal to the customer. And then everything flows from there, right?
Yeah, so basically a cash flow stream that everyone agrees upon the calculations like we've been talking about that then creates a marketplace around that cash flow stream.
And under that, there's in a competitive market, we're not going to pick the winners and make more monopolies. And then everyone's competing on the right grounds to go out and figure out how to build business models and deliver valuable solutions that actually work. And if they do that, they're going to make more money and grow. Customers are going to be happy. We're going to scale.
Love it. Love it. Cool. So last question. What are you excited about for 2021?
Well, I'm no longer running around trying to convince utilities to give us 100 grand so we can prove they have a problem. We have a new administration coming in, which isn't going to hurt either, by the way. But this is the year of the virtual power plant. We are decarbonizing rapidly in many places now, even prior to our new administration that just an hour or so ago happened. So I think we're in a quickening. And when I say we don't have to convince utilities they have a problem anymore, I think there's, things move very slow until they don't. And I think we're approaching an inflection point where, we're not just going to write reports about barriers and, run $6 million pilot programs, but things are going to start going faster and get bigger quickly, hopefully.
Love it. All right. That's a great place to kind of sign off. Thanks, Matt. I want to get an update from you at some point on this inflection point, but thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for educating us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, friends. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Podcast. For more episodes like this and to get the weekly Nexus newsletter, which, by the way, readers have said is the best way to stay up to date on the future of the smart buildings industry, please subscribe at nexuslabs.online. You can find the show notes for this conversation there as well. Have a great day.